You don't live here. ID. Now.
I've lived here 11 years.
Do you have a warrant? I asked the questions.
The man in the blue shirt had spent 36 years hunting federal criminals. He had put away 47 of them. He knew exactly what a warrant looked like and exactly what it meant when an officer couldn't produce one. This morning on his own front porch holding his own coffee, he was the one in handcuffs. By the end of that day, Deputy Holloway's badge was gone. A federal investigation was open. And the settlement that followed would cost the county more than most people earn in a lifetime. The question isn't what happened in that driveway. The question is how a man with a badge convinced himself the law didn't apply to him. If this is your first time here, subscribe. Stories like this one deserve to be told, and they deserve to be told right. Briarwood Court, Savannah, Georgia, 6:52 in the morning. The street was still. Manicured lawns, brick facades, American flags hanging from porch columns that had never seen trouble. The kind of neighborhood where people left their garage doors open and knew every neighbor by name. Marcus Webb stepped out his front door in a pressed blue shirt and dark slacks, coffee in one hand, the morning paper waiting at the end of the drive. He was 64 years old. He had spent 36 of those years as a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Not a desk agent, a field agent. He worked organized crime, financial fraud, interstate trafficking networks. He led operations that required patience, legal precision, and the kind of instincts that only come from decades of watching how systems work and how they fail. 47 federal convictions bore his name in the case files. 3 major money laundering networks dismantled across 4 states. The FBI director's citation hung on the wall inside that brick house, the Bureau's highest non-medal honor. His federal advisory credential was in his shirt pocket. Still active. Still valid. Marcus Webb did not step out that morning worried about anything. He had earned the right to a quiet life on a quiet street, and every morning on that porch was proof of it. 2 blocks north, a county patrol unit rolled slowly down Briarwood Court. Deputy Craig Holloway scanned the neighborhood from behind the windshield. 16 years on the job. 7 complaints filed against him. 0 disciplines received. He saw a black man standing on the porch of a house in this neighborhood. He didn't check the address. He didn't radio dispatch. He didn't pull the file. He just turned the wheel. He had no idea who Marcus Webb was. That was the first mistake. The patrol unit stopped at the curb. Holloway stepped out first. His partner, Deputy Ray Price, 34, followed a half step behind. Both wore full tactical gear. Both had hands near their belts before they reached the lawn. Marcus watched them approach from the porch. 36 years reading body language. 36 years reading intent. He knew what this was before either of them opened their mouths. He kept both hands visible, coffee still in his right hand. Nowhere near his pockets. Nowhere near the door. Holloway stopped at the base of the porch steps. Close. Closer than procedure required. I need to see some identification. Not a question. A command wrapped in the assumption it would be obeyed without thought. Marcus didn't flinch. His voice came back level and clear. Good morning. Can I ask what this is about? Holloway's jaw tightened. Identification. Now. Price moved to Marcus's left, cutting the angle to the front door. Marcus noted it without moving his eyes. A flanking position. He had trained officers to use that formation against suspects presenting a flight risk. He was standing on his own porch in dress slacks. My name is Marcus Webb, he said. I am a retired special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I have lived at this address for 11 years. He reached slowly into his shirt pocket with 2 fingers. I have federal advisory credentials on my person right now. He held the card out toward Holloway. Holloway didn't look at it. He didn't reach for it. He didn't ask to see it. He looked past it the way a man looks past something that inconveniences a decision he's already made. I need you to step down from the porch. Marcus kept the card extended for 3 full seconds. Then he lowered it. Do you have a warrant for this address? No answer. Across the lawn, a garden hose shut off. Eleanor Voss, 68 years old, retired schoolteacher, 22 years on Briarwood Court, stood motionless beside her flower bed. Her hand was still on the spigot. Her eyes were on the porch. She had known Marcus Webb since the week he moved in. She had been at his daughter's graduation party. She had dropped off soup the winter Linda started chemotherapy. She did not move. She did not speak. She watched. What she didn't know and what Holloway didn't know was that the Ring camera mounted beside Marcus's front door had been recording since 6:49 that morning. Wide angle, 4K resolution. A timestamp burned into every frame. The footage was already uploading to a cloud server in real time. Holloway had no idea. He had spent 16 years operating in spaces where he controlled what got seen and what didn't. He had never once considered that a quiet residential street at 7 in the morning might be watching him from 8 different directions. Step down from the porch. This is your last warning. Marcus descended the 2 steps slowly and deliberately. Both hands remained visible. He placed the coffee mug on the porch railing with the careful precision of a man who understood that every movement he made was either evidence or ammunition, and he intended it to be only one of those things. Across the street, a front door opened. James Colton, 61. Retired Army colonel, had been watching from his living room window for 90 seconds. He stepped out onto his driveway and raised his phone. He didn't announce it. He didn't ask permission. He just aimed and pressed record. Price saw him. "Sir, I need you to go back inside. This is an active police matter." Colton didn't move. "I'm on my own property. I have the right to record." His voice had the flat, unmovable calm of a man who had given orders in places where the stakes were considerably higher than this. 2 houses down, a garage door that had been halfway up stopped moving. A woman in a second-floor window leaned closer to the glass. An older man walking a dog on the far end of the court slowed to a stop. Price looked at the growing line of witnesses and leaned toward Holloway. Holloway didn't look back. He had already decided what was going to happen next. That was the second mistake. And unlike the first one, this one was going to be on camera. "Hands behind your back!" Marcus kept his voice loud and clear. Projected. The voice of a man who had spent a career understanding that witnesses were the only protection a person sometimes had. "I am unarmed." Price moved behind him. "I am on my own property." "Hands, now." "I am asking for a warrant." Nobody answered. Price locked his hand around Marcus's left wrist and pulled it back. Marcus did not resist. He kept his body, loose feet, planted spine straight. He had trained countless officers to read compliance in a subject's body. Every inch of him was showing it. It didn't matter. The cuffs clicked into place. 2 ratchets tighter than they needed to be. Marcus exhaled slowly through his nose. 36 years. 47 convictions. A director's citation on the wall 20 feet behind him. And his hands were locked behind his back on his own front porch, because a deputy with 16 years on the job and 7 unanswered complaints in his file had driven past a black man in a nice neighborhood and decided that was enough. What happened next was not in any use of force manual. Holloway placed his hand on the back of Marcus's neck and guided him hard toward the patrol vehicle parked at the curb. Not a firm escort, a shove wrapped in procedure. Marcus's shoulder struck the side of the unit. He steadied himself against the door panel, cheek close to the metal breathing measured. From where he stood pressed against the side of the car, he could see his front door. He could see the porch railing where he had set his coffee mug. And through the bedroom window on the second floor, partially visible behind the morning curtain, he could see Linda. She was standing at the glass. Linda Webb was 61 years old. She had been a high school principal for 24 years. She had run a department of 40 teachers, managed a student body of 900, and never once raised her voice in a crisis, because she had learned early that calm was the most powerful thing a person in authority could project. 6 months ago, she had been diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. She was 4 rounds into chemotherapy. She had lost 21 pounds. Some mornings she needed help getting down the stairs. On the mornings she felt strong enough, she stood at the bedroom window and watched Marcus have his coffee on the porch. It was a small thing. It had become the anchor of her day. This morning she had seen the patrol car slow at the curb. She had seen the 2 deputies approach. She had watched her husband keep his hands visible, produce his credentials, ask the right questions in the right order, do everything exactly as he had taught others to do for 4 decades. And then she had watched them put him in handcuffs anyway. She wanted to open the window. She wanted to call out. She wanted to cross the street and stand between her husband and those men and ask them one single question: whose house do you think this is? She didn't move, because she knew the way the spouse of a law enforcement officer learns to know things without being told that if she came down those stairs too fast, if she pushed open that door and moved toward them with anything they could read as aggression, they would use her. They would make her the reason things escalated. They would make her the justification for everything that came after. So she stood behind the glass and she watched them take him. She had been through 36 years of waiting for Marcus to come home safe. She had learned to hold her breath when the news covered officer incidents. She had learned to silence the part of her mind that went to the worst place first. She had never imagined she would need that skill in front of her own bedroom window. At 7:04 in the morning, Marcus Webb was placed in the rear of the patrol vehicle. The Ring camera recorded the timestamp. No Miranda rights were read. No charges were stated. No paperwork was shown. Holloway opened the rear door, guided Marcus inside with a hand on his head and closed it. He turned back toward the street. James Colton was still recording from across the road. Eleanor Voss had not moved from her lawn. 3 other phones were raised in windows and doorways along Briarwood Court. Holloway looked at them without expression. Then he looked down at his own chest. His body camera indicator light was dark. He had switched it off 4 minutes earlier, 30 seconds before he ordered the cuffs. A direct violation of Chatham County Sheriff's Office policy, which required continuous activation during all civilian contacts. It was in the legal language that would come later a deliberate act. What Holloway did not know, what he had not thought to check, was that his backup unit's camera had been running the entire time. Deputy Price's unit camera was active. The department vehicle's dash unit was active, and the Ring device mounted beside Marcus Webb's front door had captured everything from the moment the patrol car stopped at the curb. Holloway climbed into the driver's seat. Price took the passenger side. Neither of them spoke to the man in the back. The patrol unit pulled away from Briarwood Court at 7:06, 47 federal convictions, a director's citation, 36 years protecting the law. And not one person in that vehicle had looked at a warrant, checked an address, or confirmed a name, because that had never been the point. The processing facility smelled like disinfectant and recycled air. Marcus sat on a metal bench in a holding room with a camera in the ceiling corner and a locked door in front of him. His wrists were raw. His federal advisory card was in a clear plastic tray on a shelf outside the room. No one had looked at it. He had asked for a phone call at 7:41. He was told it would be arranged. At 8:17 it was. Derek Webb was 38 years old. He had spent 11 years as a federal prosecutor with the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, Washington, D.C. He had tried cases that required the kind of precision most attorneys spent entire careers trying to develop. He was calm under pressure the way surgeons are calm under pressure, not because nothing registered, but because he had trained the reaction to go somewhere useful instead of somewhere loud. His phone rang at 8:17 in the morning. He heard his father's voice, steady, stripped of warmth. The voice Marcus used when he was holding something together that wanted to fall apart. Derek listened for 90 seconds. He didn't ask questions. He didn't express disbelief. He had learned at his father's knee that disbelief was a luxury and time was not. He hung up and he went to work. His first call was to the FBI field office in Atlanta. He identified himself, stated his father's name badge history, and current advisory credential number. He requested immediate identity verification and release. The agent on the line pulled the file. 4 minutes. That was how long it took the Federal Bureau of Investigation to confirm everything Marcus Webb had told Holloway on that porch. Name, address, service record, 36 years, 47 convictions, director's citation, active advisory status. 4 minutes. The agent called the Chatham County Sheriff's Office directly. The conversation was brief. FBI voices don't need to rise to make a point. They carry the weight of the institution behind every word, and every person on the other end of the line understands exactly what that weight means. The sheriff's watch commander pulled the intake file on Marcus Webb. He looked at it for 15 seconds. Then he walked down the hall. James Colton uploaded the video at 9:03 in the morning. He didn't write a caption. He didn't need one. The footage ran 2 minutes and 40 seconds. It showed the full approach, the credential presentation, the ignored identification, the flanking position, the cuffs, the shove against the vehicle, and the patrol unit pulling away from a quiet residential street while a 68-year-old woman stood motionless on her lawn with a garden hose at her feet. By noon, the video had crossed 500,000 views. By 3 in the afternoon, every major Atlanta news outlet was running it. By evening, it had reached 3 million. National networks carried it on the hour. The headline wrote itself across every platform simultaneously. Retired FBI agent arrested in his own driveway. No warrant, no cause. Veterans organizations issued statements. Law enforcement associations called it a disgrace. Former FBI colleagues who had worked alongside Marcus for decades posted the video with a single line. 36 years. This is what he got. The Ring camera footage arrived 2 hours later, adding a second angle. Wider. Cleaner. The timestamp burned into the corner of every frame. 7:04, no warrant, no Miranda, no explanation. The optics were not just bad. They were permanent. Internal Affairs opened the review before sundown. The investigator assigned to the case pulled Holloway's service file and found what 7 prior complaints had failed to produce a pattern that was now impossible to explain away. 7 complaints in 5 years, 5 involving racial profiling, 2 involving excessive force during detentions. Every single one had been reviewed. Every single one had been closed. The language in the closure memos read like it had been copied from a template. Officer acted within operational discretion. Insufficient evidence to support claim. No further action recommended. Holloway had been told 7 times in 7 different ways that the system would absorb whatever he did and keep him on the street. He had learned the lesson the system taught him. Now there were 3 million people watching the final exam. The body camera review came back the following morning. Holloway's unit camera had been deactivated at 6:59, 31 seconds before he ordered Price to apply the cuffs. The deactivation was manual, deliberate, a direct violation of Chatham County Sheriff's Office policy, which required continuous activation from first civilian contact through the conclusion of any detention. His backup unit's camera had been running the entire time. Price's dash unit had been running. The Ring device had been running. Holloway had turned off the one camera he controlled and walked directly into a recording from 8 directions he hadn't checked. The investigator noted it in the report with a single clinical line: deactivation of recording equipment prior to use of force consistent with intentional concealment. In a courtroom, that line was worth more than any witness statement. Holloway had handed them the case. Holloway switched off his camera so there would be no record, but the neighborhood never stopped recording. The punishment he received, do you think it fit what he did? Drop your answer in the comments. The outcomes arrived the way serious outcomes always do, not all at once, but in a sequence that left no room for reversal. Deputy Craig Holloway was terminated from the Chatham County Sheriff's Office for gross misconduct, warrantless detention, racial profiling, use of force without legal basis, deliberate deactivation of required recording equipment during a civilian encounter. His law enforcement certification was revoked by the Georgia Peace Officers Standards and Training Council. The Department of Justice received a criminal referral. The charge was deprivation of rights under color of law, a federal statute that exists precisely for the moment when a badge becomes a weapon instead of a shield. Holloway was no longer a deputy. He was a defendant. The man who had spent 16 years operating on instinct and impunity would now face a system that required evidence. He had never bothered to build any in his favor. Deputy Ray Price was suspended pending review. His role in the detention, his failure to intervene, and his presence during the deliberate camera deactivation placed him squarely inside the investigation. His career in law enforcement was effectively over before the review concluded. The Chatham County Sheriff was called before a congressional subcommittee to answer for how 7 complaints against a single deputy had produced 0 disciplinary action over 5 years. The testimony lasted 4 hours. The answers were insufficient. They were supposed to be on record. Now they were. A full audit of Holloway's unit was ordered. Every operation conducted over the prior 4 years was reviewed against complaint records and demographic data. The results were referred to the DOJ Civil Rights Division for further analysis. The civil lawsuit was filed 3 weeks after Marcus walked out of that holding room. It named Holloway Price the Chatham County Sheriff's Office and the county itself. Unlawful arrest, excessive force, Fourth Amendment violations, racial profiling, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Linda Webb was named as co-plaintiff. For the emotional harm of standing at a bedroom window 4 rounds into chemotherapy, watching 2 deputies place her husband in handcuffs on his own property. Unable to move, unable to intervene, unable to breathe. The case never reached trial. The county settled for an amount that legal analysts described as one of the largest individual payouts in a Georgia civil rights case involving law enforcement misconduct. The exact figure was not disclosed publicly. What was disclosed was this: Marcus Webb donated a significant portion of the settlement to establish a legal defense fund for citizens wrongfully detained by law enforcement officers. People without a son at the DOJ, people without neighbors who recorded, people without 36 years of federal credentials in their shirt pocket, people who had no one to call. Now they would have someone. Weeks later, Marcus Webb sat on his front porch on Briarwood Court. Blue shirt, fresh coffee, the newspaper under his arm. Linda sat beside him in the second chair they had moved out that morning. She was thinner than she had been. The treatments were still running, but she was there, on the porch, in the morning light, with him. The American flag hung from the same hook it had always hung from. Eleanor Voss waved from next door. James Colton nodded from across the street. The street looked the same as it always had. Quiet, manicured, ordinary. But something had changed. Not the houses, not the lawns, not the flags. What changed was what people now understood could happen here. On a street like this, to a man like this. On a Tuesday morning when someone with a badge decided a credential wasn't worth looking at. Marcus began speaking publicly in the months that followed. Not on cable panels, not for viral clips. In rooms where decisions get made, police academies, congressional briefings, community forums in cities where families like his had stories that never made the news. He said the same thing every time. I spent 36 years carrying a badge. I know what it's supposed to mean. I know the weight of it. And I know exactly what it looks like when someone forgets. Craig Holloway was last seen entering a federal courthouse in Atlanta on a Tuesday morning. No cameras followed him in. No reporters called his name. The career he had built on instinct and impunity was gone. What remained was a case number, a court date, and a training bulletin now circulating through every sheriff's office in the state of Georgia. It contained one still frame from James Colton's video. A man in a blue shirt, hands cuffed behind his back, pressed against a patrol vehicle in his own driveway. An American flag in the background. A coffee mug on the porch railing behind him. Beneath the image, 2 lines in bold type. This is what failure looks like. No names were printed. They didn't need to be. The badge was already gone. If this story deserved to be told, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe because stories like this one should never be buried. And the next case coming to this channel, the badge involved is even higher. And the outcome no one saw coming.